Okay, everyone. In this unit, we're going to go over body alterations, coverings, and artifacts. The corresponding chapter in your textbook is Chapter 6. Also, don't forget to submit your reading responses by Monday night because I'll be holding an online conference on Tuesday during that time, and I can address any questions anyone has about this unit. Okay, so what exactly are body alterations, coverings, and artifacts? Body alterations are any changes to our physical person. And examples of this include alterations to the hairstyle, length, or color, makeup, or permanent changes such as tattoos or plastic surgery. I want you to think of coverings as anything that's covering the body, particularly clothing. Artifacts are pretty much accessories, or anything that we use to accessorize or adorn the body or the clothes. Each of these categories is communicating something different about you to everyone else, and none of them operate independently of one another. Okay, so what is a subcode communicating? Just like physical appearance, this subcode is one of the first things that are seen by other people, and it can be seen from fairly far away. So just try to keep in mind that even before you've introduced yourself, people are looking at you and they are forming their own perceptions based on what they can see. Our chosen alterations and coverings are already communicating hints and information about our personality, our values, or even our culture. And generally speaking, alterations are usually seeking to fulfill some sort of purpose, whether that's impressing others, trying to fit in, remember when we talked about homophily, or even to indicate desired group membership. In a lot of cases, alterations can simply be to set yourself apart or to be unique in your own self-expression. So let's get into some of the ways that we can alter, cover, and adorn ourselves. Our hair is one of the most common things we make alterations to. Anyone getting a haircut or even their roots done is performing an alteration. One of the first things to note about hairstyles is that what's popular comes and goes in cycles. What's popular today will probably not be popular in 10 years, and what was popular 30 years ago might be making a comeback. Men can also make alterations to their beards. In this image, Ben Affleck has a beard. It's been found consistently that in advertising and sales, it's a common perception for men with beards to be perceived as more trustworthy, and this had a positive influence on purchasers. Being able to grow a beard is also connected with the perception of masculinity as well as credibility. There are some cases, though, where this idea tends to backfire, right? So here's an image of Kip from the film Napoleon Dynamite. While they may have been popular in the 60s and 70s, today, not always, but oftentimes, mustaches have the opposite effect of beards. Makeup is another way we can alter our appearance. Here we have an image of Mila Kunis, casually dressed on the left and ready for some event on the right. Makeup has obviously been used to change her appearance to some degree, and while I wouldn't go so far to say she's unrecognizable, she definitely looks pretty transformed. Makeup is actually really old. Makeup dates back to the ancient Egyptians, or 6000 BC, where even men wore makeup, like eyeliner. Today, makeup is much more lucrative of an industry than it was for the Egyptians. According to the census, the makeup industry grosses billions of dollars per year worldwide, which basically means a lot of people are spending money on it to alter their appearance. The use of a particular makeup or cosmetic can change depending on the individual's role in a situation. For example, Ms. Kunis probably wouldn't consider herself red carpet ready in her picture on the left, and she probably wouldn't go grocery shopping wearing what she's wearing on the right. The situation can sometimes dictate what our appearance will be. Lastly, the use of cosmetics, for some people anyway, has the potential to bolster and enhance their self-confidence during social situations and interactions. Tanning. Tanning is another form of body alteration. As most of you probably already know, there's two types of tanning. Naturally, via the sunshine, or artificially in a tanning bed, sometimes termed fake and bake. Tanning is typically seen as a marker of good health and affluence, sort of like alluding to the fact that you have enough time and money to go on vacation and get a tan, especially if it's in the winter. Tanning beds were brought to the U.S. in 1979 by Friedrich Wolff. Research tells us that tanning in these types of beds has been linked to various types of skin cancer, and enough tanning, naturally or otherwise, can cause the skin to take on a leathery appearance, especially as we age. So remembering to use sunscreen is pretty important. Cross-culturally, this type of tanning is not always valued. In certain cultures, like Pakistan and India, lighter skin is considered more desirable. Moving on to tattoos. Tattoos have continued to gain popularity, especially since the 1990s. It's now estimated that around 10% of the United States has some sort of tattoo or piercing, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Tattoos can communicate several things, like group membership. Types of membership displayed can include a wide variety of things, like military service, cultural membership, or even gang affiliation. The interesting thing about tattoos is that a lot of times people get tattoos in an effort of self-expression, but when the tattoos are visible, they're sending information to others about themselves and breaking the norms of self-disclosure at the same time. What this means is that others are able to infer very personal information about you before they've gotten to a more intimate level of friendship. Essentially, your tattoo is telling intimate things about you to others before you do. Lastly, the meaning that gets communicated through tattoos has changed as well. At one time, tattoos were seen solely as an act of rebellion, and then were more common as a marker of military service. Now, they're a form of art and self-expression, although for some, still occasionally an act of rebellion. Piercings are also known as body adornments. In this image, actress Rooney Mara is pictured in her portrayal as Lisbeth Salander in the film The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The prevalence of piercings, like tattoos, has steadily increased over the years. In this image, Rooney is sporting at least 4 different styles of piercing that I can count, and each of them is called something different. Certain stereotypes are also associated with multiple piercings, especially for women. Women with facial piercings are rated as more creative, more mysterious, more outgoing, and less religious. This is limited to American culture, as some cultures and tribes in various parts of the world very highly value multiple facial piercings. Okay, coverings. Coverings are anything that serves to cover the body in some way, also known as clothing. Literally, clothing serves 2 main purposes: to protect the body and to conceal it, both from weather and the view of others. And this concept of concealment is also referred to as modesty. Children start learning these clothing norms really early on, and they learn it from what the adults are wearing and what the media is wearing. Clothing also serves as a form of self-expression and identity, and it can also serve to aid in identifying with certain groups. For example, if you're in the medical field, you probably wear some type of white coat or scrubs, and you likely wouldn't show up in those scrubs if you were applying for some sort of job in the legal or corporate field. The key here is to remember that the context and situation always need to be considered simultaneously when we're evaluating any type of subcode. Building on that point, clothing communicates status. So like I just mentioned, if you're wearing a white coat or scrubs, like this woman, people are most likely going to infer that you work in the medical field. Now, what can we tell from this gentleman that's wearing a hard hat and a safety vest? More than likely, he works in some type of construction. The last point I want to touch on is the clothing of law enforcement. So their uniforms are the first thing that sets them apart as police officers. And interestingly, their uniform has also been cited as their most effective tool in the field. And sometimes their presence, or just being seen in their uniform, can discourage certain types of crime. Additionally, it's also found that we're more likely to comply with the requests of somebody dressed in this type of uniform. Now, in the next class, I want us to discuss, if we have time, the ways that this marker of status gets taken advantage of in several fields. Rosenfield and Plax identified several clothing orientations to go along with certain characteristics of dress. Clothing consciousness is somebody that we would consider to be very interested in what they wear. They make careful, informed decisions about their clothes, and they spend a lot of money on it. They like to wear what the current trends tell them is in. Exhibitionism is using clothes to attract attention. These outfits are usually very bright, leopard print, and may have short skirts with very high heels and generally are revealing. Think of club wear. Practicality is dressing solely for comfort. And practical dressers are generally less concerned with being in style and more concerned about being comfortable. Conservatism is a little bit different than practicality. So it doesn't have a lot to do with comfort, and it's more involved with calling as little attention to oneself as possible. So these would be the professional outfits that are termed sort of dull, neutral in color, and they're very simple in shape with little accessories. And lastly, the term designer, which refers to the degree that an individual wants to work in the fashion industry or dress up for fun. People with this orientation are most likely filling their DVR with Project Runway and Fashion Police. Richmond and McCroskey identified some key generalizations that we make based on clothing. Firstly, when we're making generalizations, or judging you might say, based on clothing, we tend to be more accurate in this area than when we generalize based on other factors. We infer things about age, status, and socioeconomic group fairly accurately when we're basing off of someone's choice of dress. Also, how harshly we judge someone based on their dress depends on how well we know them. We tend to give more leeway to those that we have pre-existing friendships with than those that we've just met. The idea here is that first impressions are important, they happen very quickly, and you only get one chance. The perceptions made by first impressions are important factors that can determine whether or not you want to continue interacting with someone. So we tend to want to interact more with those that are dressed more similarly to ourselves. Notice the theme of homophily here yet again. Also, like I mentioned earlier, if somebody wants to identify as part of a group, clothing is one tool that can help accomplish that. And lastly, our clothing can denote our credibility levels. The nicer dressed someone is, the more likely we are to perceive them as a credible source. Finally, we come to artifacts. Artifacts are accessories that we use to adorn our bodies and clothing, and these can function as group identifiers. For example, if an employer is requiring their employees to wear badges as a form of identification rather than a dress code, those badges are functioning as an artifact rather than the dress code functioning as a covering. Sometimes a person is so closely identified with their artifact that we have trouble picturing them without it. One example, as some of you might be familiar with, is Harry Potter. So he's very closely associated with his glasses, which also happens to be the artifact with the most stigmas associated. So individuals that wear glasses have historically been rated as more intelligent, honest, religious, conventional, and unimaginative. But with the increasingly popular designer frames and contacts, glasses no longer are just a functional item and can be a fashion accessory as well. So this means even if you don't need corrective lenses, you can still use glasses as an artifact to make a fashion statement instead of needing them to see. Okay, so to wrap up, what function does the subcode serve? It identifies us and presents information about us to others. It can help us take control of the interaction via status, like I spoke about. If you're wearing a type of uniform, it can help with request compliance. It can indicate the relationship of interactants, like if you're a member of a group. It can display affective information, like emotions. It can help you take control of your appearance through the various orientations we talked about, or it can even function as a form of deception. For example, if you're dressing in a manner that belies your socioeconomic status or occupation. And one reason we might want to do this is if we're interviewing for a different job. So this is the end of the lecture, and we're going to meet in class as usual next week. If you have any questions, I want you to send me a message, or you can participate in the conference hour that will be held during the date and time indicated on our class page.